Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
The United States of America is one of the best factions for the aggressive player who likes to rush and keep constant pressure on the enemy. What they lack in brute force, they make up for in speed and flexibility. This is definitely one of my favorite factions in the game. Anyway, this is a 2 versus 2 that I had with Angelos a while back on the Farmstead map. We are in command of the USA, and our opponents are in command of Germany. I start off with a regular squad of infantry, but after scrolling around in the fog of war for a while, I hear a German motorcycle coming up. Or an M20. Bringing up a motorcycle or Kugelwagen very early going may let you get to the center flag point first, but if you end up losing it, you're going to be at a big disadvantage. Of course, the first thing you want to do when you hear one of them approaching is to order your men to hit the deck and turn off fire at will, because the last thing you want to do is give away your position. Although these early units are not armored, they can still tear up your opening squad if you're not careful. The best thing to do is to crawl into position to either flank it or to sneak up on it and lob a grenade, which is exactly what I'm going to do. The biggest mistake this guy has made is the fact that he's brought up this motorcycle and just kept it stationary. If you're going to keep any vehicle stationary, you need to make sure you have enough men around to give you a decent amount of line of sight to prevent any enemies from sneaking up on you. So anyway, I managed to sneak up an SMG man, and notice how I can see the motorcycle's line of sight in red. You do this by clicking once on the enemy unit. As long as you're prone and not in the overlapping arcs that represent the eyes of the crew, the enemy will not see you, and because this guy hasn't moved around, I managed to cook a grenade and blow up his motorcycle. So now the enemy is at a disadvantage. Only one of them has infantry, while both Angelos and I have our squads pretty much intact. We want to rush up and lock down the center as fast as possible while the enemy is still weak. I'm also going to bring up an assault squad. This is because I'm anticipating a quick enemy counterattack and I want to maintain that numerical advantage that we have. There's no point of both of us going for a second squad, because if they're bringing up some sort of light armor next, none of us are going to have the MP to deal with it. So I'm going to go with infantry, and Angelos is going to save for tank support. Now as the USA, you want to focus on bringing up mainly regular infantry. Although the BAR is not exactly a brilliant machine gun, the American M1 Garants have superior rate of fire to any other faction standard rifleman. This will give you the upper hand in a firefight against Germany, providing you can deal with the enemy's MG42. However, for my second squad, I went for an assault infantry squad because I anticipated a little urban combat. There are quite a few little houses in the center, and as a general rule, assault infantry fare better in urban combat because it's usually close quarters. Unfortunately, the enemy has reacted quickly, and they've brought up 2 full squads and a heavy machine gun to wrestle back control of the center flag point. My assault infantry get caught out in the open against a superior force, and I lose a lot of men. Remember, always try to avoid open ground when possible. In hindsight, I should have instantly set up a nice big sandbag line near the center as soon as I took out that motorcycle. I also should have made an effort to get those assault troops in between those buildings as soon as possible to minimize the chance of them getting caught in a long-range firefight where most of my men will not be able to engage the enemy. So Angelos brings up his steward and starts shelling the enemy reinforcements from a distance. The center should be ours again as soon as he's done mopping up the remaining enemy troops, but the key here is to stay aggressive. I bring up a Maxim, which is a quad 50 cal machine gun emplacement to help suppress any enemy troops in the center, but I'm also going to bring up another assault squad to assault the flag on our right flank.
SMGs.
Again, I've brought up assault troops and not regulars mainly because the terrain is very hilly on the right flank, and firefights on that side generally involve a lot of grenades and close quarters combat. Stay aggressive. Keep the pressure on the enemy as the USA. It's the only way you're going to compete in terms of armor. You can't let them bring up tanks that you can't handle, so you need to keep the pressure on them with the infantry. If you sit back and let them regroup and bank MP, before you know it, they're going to have those Tigers on the field, and the USA doesn't have anything in the early and mid game that can go toe-to-toe with the German heavy tank. Tigers, Panthers, even Panzer IV Hs can really threaten the USA, and your best bet at taking them out before you can bring up one of your heavy tanks like the Pershing is to bring up a tank destroyer. But I'll get to that in a sec. So we keep the pressure on them, but what do they do when they feel like they're being overwhelmed by infantry? They bring up emplacements. The enemy at this point has a Flak 38, which is a 20mm autocannon, a heavy machine gun emplacement, and a Pak 38 anti-tank gun to deal with any of our armor. This is effective at dealing with infantry and light tanks, but Germany shines with its tanks, and so in a way, we've stopped them from playing to their faction's strengths by keeping constant pressure on them. Frankly speaking, they probably would have brought up anti-infantry and anti-tank emplacements anyway, because that's how most players play these days, which is a shame. There's a lot less emphasis on tanks and infantry, it seems, which makes the game a lot less fun to play in my opinion. Anyway, that squad of infantry that I had brought up, which was a regular squad by the way, not an assault squad, I made a mistake there, gets depleted by their emplacements, so I bring up my first hero unit, the United States Marine Corps. For 2 hero points, you get a 10-man squad of some of the finest soldiers the US has to offer, the Marines. These are elite regular troops. They come with a lot of sandbags, 2 light machine gunners, and elite weapon proficiency. They still carry the M1 Garand's and Thompson submachine guns, but because these guys have high weapon proficiency, we want to try to get as many of them to wield machine guns to really pour it on the enemy. Whenever you see a destroyed tank lying around, you should always try to grab its machine gun from its inventory using an elite soldier, like a Marine, if possible. This is because they'll have a high weapon proficiency when using it, making it very lethal. So basically, these guys are great at defending as well as attacking, which makes them a very cheap, flexible, and efficient infantry force. I like to spam them because it lets me save up my MP for heavier armor. I've also brought up a Stuart here, which is an American light tank, to officially begin the assault on the right flank. But unfortunately, this assault has begun too late because the enemy has already had the chance to bring up a heavy machine gun emplacement to guard the right flank point. Heavy machine gun emplacements are especially effective here because there's such little room to flank them, and the hilly terrain makes it necessary to get really close with the tank in order to fire at them. This is dangerous because enemy troops can easily hide around the MG and suddenly pop up to ruin your day. Anyway, my opponent here sees my Stuart and brings up a Panzer IIIJ to counter my little assault here. I'm not going to push my luck and try to duke it out with a Panzer IIIJ, even though the Stuart's gun can still pack a punch, so I pull back and try to get him to chase me. If he does end up chasing me, he's going to get within range of this bazooka man that I have waiting behind this big church. AT infantry are great guys to have lying around behind buildings. More often than not, your opponent will not see them, and if he gets too close, you can pop out from behind cover and destroy his tank with a bazooka shell. AT infantry are cheap and can take out even the heaviest of tanks if you get a straight direct shot at 90 degrees to the frontal armor or side armor. Never fire a bazooka shell at an angle because more often than not the enemy tank will shrug off the shell and your bazooka man will be shot. Anyway, the Panzer III suddenly comes out of the cover of the defilade and manages to get a one-shot kill on my Stuart. I quickly react with my bazooka man who instantly fires a shot that hull destroys the Panzer IIIJ. So with both our tanks out of the equation now, I'm going to go for plan B. A half-track rush. Allied half-tracks come with a 50 cal machine gun that can lay waste to enemy troops and even destroy the sandbags on a machine gun nest if they get close enough. But you need to make sure you have infantry around to give you line of sight, because as you can see here, the enemy will definitely try to rush up some men to lob an AT grenade at your half-track. Anyway, these guys are German paratroopers who are very accurate, so I don't want to get super close to them because they will kill the gunner on my half-track. Anyway, I continue to harass his position, and before I know it, my opponent has brought up a second Panzer IIIJ, and this is exactly what I want. If you can force your opponent to bring up low-tier panzers, you're going to drain their MP, and that way, you know you're not going to be facing any really heavy German armor like a Yak Panther later on in the game. Anyway, the Panzer III ends up taking out my half-track, but I'm not too concerned because the whole purpose of this was to keep the pressure on the enemy, and I forced him to go with the Panzer III. Anyway, I've done a short time lapse, and over here I've borrowed a Hellcat from Angelos to flank that Panzer III that destroyed my half-track. The Hellcat is a superb tank destroyer. It is extremely vulnerable to any sort of fire. Even 20mm autocannon shots can destroy its hull, but it makes up for this by being relatively cheap, being extremely fast, having a low profile, and also boasting a very powerful gun. The 76mm gun on the Hellcat can easily take out a German Tiger tank from quite a distance if you manage to flank the Tiger without being seen. Notice how I'm in direct control and I've zoomed right down to the Hellcat over here. I've done this because I want to make sure that as little of my hull is visible to the enemy. I'm using the fact that the terrain is very hilly on this side of the map to protect and conceal my Hellcat. This is something everyone should practice doing. Using terrain to your advantage in tank combat can really tip the odds in your favor even if your tank is inferior to the enemy's. So after a couple of well-placed flank shots on the Panzer III, I've destroyed its hull and managed to retreat with my Hellcat without facing any return fire. And this captures the essence of playing as the United States of America. This is the faction that needs to rely on speed in attack and flanking. Hellcats are your best friends. The speed and gun should allow you to take out most enemy vehicles if you can flank your enemy without being seen. The key is to remain hidden. Keep in mind that if your Hellcat is spotted, 9 out of 10 times it's going to get destroyed because its armor is almost negligible. If you do get spotted, you can use the Hellcat's speed to get the hell out. Now with this Panzer III down, I'm going to start my second push on the enemy right flank. I bring up a Jumbo, a 1000 MP tank with 100mm of good sloped armor. This is one of the best tanks the US has to offer. It can stand up in a face-to-face slugfest with a Tiger thanks to its excellent armor, but unfortunately has the gun of the standard Sherman, which is very average at best. It comes equipped with a 50 cal machine gun and isn't as slow as most 100mm armor tanks in the game. All these features combined make it one of the best pusher tanks in the game. One variant of the Jumbo is the Jumbo 76, which is a US hero unit. For 8 points, you get a Jumbo tank with the gun of a Hellcat, a deadly combination. But I don't like saving up my hero points, so you're not going to see one of those in this battle. In response to my Jumbo, my opponent has brought up a Tiger tank. Now the fact that the Jumbo has insane turret armor, and because its frontal armor is sloped, the Tiger still has a hard time taking it out frontally despite having an excellent 88mm gun. However, a good side shot, even from a Panzer IV, can easily take out a Jumbo, so you need to make sure that you're always facing the enemy with your frontal armor. Now I've brought up Angelos' Hellcat on the far right to try and flank the Tiger while it duels with my Jumbo, but thanks to how close the edge of the map is to the right flank point, there isn't much room for my Hellcat to flank, and so it gets spotted and the Tiger ends up destroying it. Remember, a good side shot on a Tiger from a Hellcat, especially at close range, will easily destroy it. I do manage to get a shot on the Tiger, but I only manage to track it before my Hellcat gets killed. Now a tracked vehicle is a guaranteed casualty if you can react quickly. If you can bring up an officer as soon as possible to drop some flares on the tracked tank, the accurate artillery barrage that he'll call in is more than enough to instantly hull destroy even the largest of tanks. So Angelos buys me an officer, and I rush him up to try and shoot some flares at the Tiger. In the meantime, I'm going to try to get a good hit on the Tiger with my Jumbo. Now despite the fact that it has a pretty weak gun, if I load APCR rounds instead of armor-piercing rounds, I might just get lucky and get a good hit on the frontal armor. Always use APCR on high-value targets if you can afford to sneak up on them, or if you're already in APCR range, because APCR rounds have a higher penetration value than standard AP rounds. The thing is, I don't want to get too close to the Tiger, because if he uses APCR on my Jumbo at point blank, he will destroy it, and that's the last thing I want to deal with over here. Anyway, I bring up my officer, and I've totally forgot that this machine gun nest can still see around the church despite the fact that I've thrown smoke grenades to try and cover his approach. And so my officer gets nailed before I can even get in range of the Tiger. I quickly try to pick up his flare gun using the nearby soldier, but he gets killed too, and the opportunity is wasted. In hindsight, I should have been a lot more cautious and tried to crawl forward with my officer rather than just run. But I didn't want to waste any time because it doesn't take a very long time to repair the tracks of most tanks. I do eventually pick up the flare gun and use it on the damn machine gun nest, which ends up being blown sky high. This just goes so far to demonstrate how effective one emplacement can be when it's employed in a bottleneck situation like on this narrow space between the church and the edge of the map. Anyway, Angelos brings up a Slugger, which you can't see because I'm recording this live, and the Slugger is the heaviest tank destroyer the Americans have to offer. It is slower than the Hellcat and has a higher profile, but it has a 90mm monster gun that can eat a Tiger for breakfast. So he ends up getting a shot on the Tiger, which kills almost the entire crew, but fails to damage the Tiger. So I'm going to seize the initiative and rush forward with my Jumbo to try and get into a point-blank range and nail the Tiger from the front. And that's exactly what happens. I load up an APCR round and drive forward until I have more than 100mm of penetration on the Tiger. The indicator turns green and I let him have it. The Tiger's hull is instantly destroyed. However, Angelos' opponent has brought up a Panther to deal with a Slugger, and annoyingly he instantly hull damages Angelos' Slugger as soon as he appears because of how close Angelos is forced to move up to get a shot on the Tiger. However, my Jumbo has a perfect flank shot on the Panther, which has weak side armor, and because Angelos has luckily managed to track the Panther, the enemy tank is a sitting duck and can't turn around to face my Jumbo, which also hull destroys the Panther. Now I don't manage to take the right flank point because their opponents instantly ruin the fun by each of them bringing up one of their strongest hero units. A pair of veteran Tigers roll onto the battlefield. The veteran Tiger is basically a standard Tiger tank with much faster reload time and supposedly better accuracy, and costs 7 German hero points. Now our only hope of taking them out was for me to bring up a Pershing tank, which I wasn't too far away from getting, but Angelos' slugger was not completely destroyed by that Panther. He manages to patch the thing up, and as soon as it's good to go, he gets an awesome shot on one of the Vet Tigers, which instantly blows up. The owner of the other Vet Tiger makes a micromanagement mistake and accidentally makes his tank turn around to move it back, and this exposes its flank to me. I instantly rush up my jumbo and get a juicy flank shot on the Tiger, which instantly kills it. With their MP and hero points completely drained, one of our opponents rage quits and the tide of the battle has changed. I bring up another hero unit, the 101st Airborne. For 3 points, I get a half-track full of paratroopers that can quickly rush to the front line. Again, paratroopers are elite infantry units and have superior weaponry to any of your standard infantry units, which makes them an excellent fighting force. I wish I could have shown you Angelos' side of the battle a lot more, because he makes excellent use of this faction's most effective hero units, the Sherman 105. For 5 hero points, the Americans get a Sherman tank, with its gun replaced with a 105 howitzer gun. It can fire almost pinpoint artillery shells at a distance of 150 in-game meters, making it a mobile artillery sniper. This is the perfect piece of equipment to call up when your opponent is spamming emplacements, and that's exactly what these guys were doing in the center. I haven't been able to show it very well, but at one point they had up to 4 machine gun nests overlooking the center flag point, and Angelos managed to tear them up with his 105 Sherman. However, it is imperative that you keep this unit safe. It fires in an arc, so ideally you want to place it in the defilade of a hill, or behind an obstacle to keep it away from the enemy fire, because after all it's only a Sherman tank. Angelos also makes excellent use of the radio operator, which costs 4 hero points, and he manages to use him to take out tanks and emplacements as well. It's a shame I don't get to show you that. Now at this point I bring up a Calliope, which is probably my favorite unit in the whole game. This is another Sherman tank which has the ability to fire deadly rocket barrages at the enemy. This is the ideal unit to use to clear out concentrated enemy fortifications and positions. The Calliope can fire 2 barrages one after the other, but you should only fire a barrage at valuable targets. Blobs of troops and concentrated emplacement spams are the perfect targets. The battle is pretty much over at this point, but I still wanted to use this little fiend to show you how effective it is. Anyway, good game to our opponents. This was a tough battle as indicated by the score, and in the end it came down to who made more mistakes pretty much. If there's anything to take away from this video, it's that to be successful with the USA, you need to be constantly applying pressure on the enemy and use the speed and raw strength of your tank destroyer guns to flank and destroy the enemy. It's not easy playing as the USA, but if you use them correctly, they can be as deadly as any other faction in the game. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, push the like button, and stay tuned for more videos.